Hi everyone, I'm Stephanie Panay, and in today's podcast, I'm going to be reading an essay called Leaving the Desert. It's from volume 2 of my book Reflections on A Course in Miracles, and I wrote this essay when I was reflecting on a psychological experiment that I was taught during my psychology training, and also I had been reading about Karpman's drama triangle, which is an interesting theory developed by Karpman, not Cartman from South Park, just in case you're wondering. Karpman, Karpman. He was a guy who did an analysis of fairy tales. Anyway, I'll explain it in the essay, but he came up with a drama triangle consisting of 3 different roles that he felt were easily formed in any kind of group dynamic. And I applied that along with the psychological experiment that I discussed early in the essay to A Course in Miracles. And at the end of the essay, I'm also going to have a reflection on a section in the course called The Fear of Redemption. Looking back on the essay, I can see how the Fear of Redemption section would really round the essay off and just take it that step further. So without further ado, here is Leaving the Desert. During my undergraduate psychology studies, I came across an experiment that has stayed with me over the years. It was conducted in the late 60s by Martin Seligman, a psychologist more widely known for developing a branch of psychology called positive psychology. In the experiment, a large box was divided in half by a low barrier. The floor on one side of the barrier was electrified, randomly emitting shocks, and several dogs were placed on this side. Surprisingly, while some dogs jumped over the barrier into safer territory, others remained behind, not even attempting to get to the other side. The dogs that didn't try to avoid the shocks had previously been in an environment in which they couldn't escape them. This finding provided the foundation for Seligman's positive psychology. The dogs had learnt that resistance is futile, a kind of pessimism about future possibilities based on feeling helpless. Seligman thus coined the term learned helplessness. In researching the details of this experiment, I realised that my enduring memory of it was distorted. Instead of there being many dogs, I'd imagined a single dog, locked alone in a cage with nowhere to be safe from shocks. Fairly soon, the dog lies down on the floor, submitting itself passively to its presumed fate. Someone then appears and opens the door to the cage, but the dog doesn't make any move towards freedom. That was what was in my imagination about the experiment. Okay, subtitle, Control. The issue of control is at the heart of learned helplessness, and further experiments have confirmed the depressive effect of feeling a lack of control over painful circumstances. For example, in one experiment, people were asked to perform mental tasks while in the presence of a distracting noise. Those who had the option of using a switch to turn off the noise performed better, even if they didn't use the switch. Simply knowing that you have some control over a situation makes it more bearable, or so it seems. Perhaps this explains why, as a child trying to sleep, I was always more distressed by the sound of the television when I knew it was my father watching it than when I knew it was my mother. My father had an authoritarian parental style. My mother had a gentler one. I felt helpless when my dad was watching the TV. I wouldn't dare ask him to turn it down. When my mum was watching the television, however, I knew the noise could be lessened, and so it didn't bother me. I quickly learnt that I could fall asleep easily when my dad was watching television if I simply imagined it was my mother who was watching instead. And that, dear listener, is a very true story. Okay, subtitle, The World You See. There are several passages in A Course in Miracles that emphasise that the way to inner peace is open to us now. So here are a few quotes from different workbook lessons. The first from lesson 225. The way is open. Now we follow it in peace together. Okay, from 182. And now the way is open, and the journey has an end in sight at last. And from workbook lesson 195. An ancient door is swinging free again. A long-forgotten word re-echoes in our memory and gathers clarity as we are willing once again to hear. These 3 workbook lessons reflect the rewards of forgiveness, a process introduced in earlier lessons which highlight that we are not the victims of the world we see. Our peace doesn't have to be lost to it, because our inner experience is determined by our interpretations. It's a quote from the Course's manual. If anger comes from an interpretation and not a fact, it is never justified. Once this is even dimly grasped, the way is open. Now it is possible to take the next step. The interpretation can be changed at last. End of quote. As in my aforementioned television story, once I changed my interpretation of the noise, my experience changed. I no longer felt angry at my father for his inconsiderateness, if I imagined that it simply wasn't him, and neither did I feel frustrated at my lack of power. In terms of A Course in Miracles, I no longer experienced the noise as an attack, but as a neutral phenomenon. I also think that because I had a rather antagonistic relationship with my father at the time, perceiving anything he did as an attack, and myself as a victim, was easily achieved. The Course would say we had a special relationship, and we all have special relationships with people and things we find challenging, as well as those we find comforting. Holding on to our perceptions in these special relationships is what contributes to our painful experience of the world. Quote from the text. In looking at the special relationship, it is necessary first to realise that it involves a great amount of pain. Anger, despair, guilt and attack all enter into it, broken into by periods in which they seem to be gone. End of quote. Subtitle: Special Relationships. All principles in the Course have their basis in its metaphysics, in its myth about how this world and our specific identity seemed to come about. The special relationship is no exception. Whenever we choose to identify it with our ego, or the separated self, we also choose to, quote, relive the single instant when the time of terror took the place of love, end of quote. In other words, we feel guilt for pushing God and love away. We then experience the pain of anticipated punishment and of the loss of love and of a perception of ourselves as incomplete and deficient. To deal with these feelings of anxiety and deficiency, we establish what the Course refers to as special hate and special love relationships. Whenever we project our guilt out onto someone by blaming our loss of peace on their behaviour, we form a special hate relationship with them. We might hate them for their inconsiderateness, for example, or their impulsivity, a reflection of our own original error of not considering God and our foolhardy jump at the chance to be separate. In special hate, we point a finger at someone else for our misery and we adopt an if only orientation. Now, here's a quote from the workbook lesson 71. The ego's plan for salvation centres around holding grievances. It maintains that if someone else spoke or acted differently, if some external circumstance or event were changed, you would be saved. Thus, the source of salvation is constantly perceived as outside yourself. Each grievance you hold is a declaration and an assertion in which you believe that says, if this were different, I would be saved. The change of mind necessary for salvation is thus demanded of everyone and everything except yourself. End of quote. So we could say, talk about learned helplessness. If the change or salvation lies in everything except for yourself, then that's a pretty helpless situation. Okay, carrying on. Special relationships have their foundations in perceptions of differences. The word special itself means something distinct or separate. The ego, based on a thought of separation, therefore hones in on differences as a way of maintaining itself. The ego always compares. For us to be innocent, for example, someone else must be guilty, and so we have a need to see victims and persecutors, the basis of special hate. Here's a quote from the text. All that is ever cherished as a hidden belief, to be defended though unrecognised, is faith in specialness. What else could justify attack? So you could say, what else but a faith in differences could justify attack? For who could hate someone whose self, capital S, is his and whom he knows? Only the special could have enemies, for they are different and not the same. End of quote. And here's another quote from further on in that same chapter 24. Would it be possible for you to hate your brother if you were like him? Could you attack him if you realised you journey with him to a goal that is the same? End of quote. In contrast to special hate relationships, special love relationships are largely designed to take care of our feelings of incompleteness and deprivation. We think certain people, things, activities will make us feel whole and valuable. When these objects of special love give us the status or affection we need in order to feel good or significant, we, quote, love them. There is a degree of ambivalence in special love relationships, though, because no one likes feeling dependent on someone else to feel good about themselves, and so we hate the object of our special love for having that power over us and exposing our dependency. Nonetheless, we turn to them instead of God to feel better. They are our substitutes for God. Quote, the special love relationship is the ego's chief weapon for keeping you from heaven. And I'd like to just read out another quote from the Course. This is from a section called The Two Pictures in Chapter 17. Every special relationship you have made has, as its fundamental purpose, the aim of occupying your mind so completely that you will not hear the call for truth. And I think that we could all agree that a special hate relationship or a special love relationship certainly takes our attention and becomes a preoccupation. We imagine a lot of things we wish we had said or that we could say. We try and manage somebody else's behaviour. It involves a lot of mental activity and mental energy. They keep our mind busy. Carrying on with the essay, not heading towards freedom translates into holding on to our special relationships, not onto the relationships themselves, but to the perceptions associated with them. So it's not the relationship itself that is the problem, it's what we're using it for, specialness. It's these perceptions that keep us in habitual patterns of behaviour designed to meet our specialness needs to project our guilt onto someone else, and to get what we think will make us feel complete, whether that be attention, affection, approval, money, that kind of thing. Taking the first steps towards freedom from pain requires seeing our behaviour for what it is. And there are many psychological models that can help in the process of discernment. So those special relationships that cause us so much pain and keep our minds so busy so that we can't hear the call of truth, that is like staying on that side of the box where all the charges, all the shocks are happening. And so it's like staying in our wrong mind. And there is only just this little barrier in the box in the experiment over which we could jump and go into the right mind. But because the special relationship has preoccupied us so much, it makes such a din within our mind and we become so intense about it and hyper-focused on these relationships. We can't even hear the call that's coming. Maybe the dogs on the other side are saying, hey, come over here, it's better over here. We can't even hear that because we are so preoccupied with these special relationships, which is what the ego wants. So becoming aware, a light bulb moment where you can go, oh my gosh, I'm in specialness. I've identified with my ego. I'm trapped in something and I just need to know how to get to the other side into my right mind. Part of that process, is that recognition, the realizing that you are indeed trapped in something and that you could get out. And this is where I bring in Karpman's triangle. His drama triangle, I feel, is a nice way of elaborating some of the patterns that we fall into when we identify with the ego. So the subtitle is called Bizarre Drama Triangle. And if you are familiar with the rock group New Order, you might remember their hit in, was it the 90s or the 80s, Bizarre Love Triangle? Well, that's my era. And so that's why I've called this Bizarre Drama Triangle. So here we go. A helpful way of becoming aware of specialness is to view our most habitual behaviour in relation to Karpman's drama triangle. This model was developed by American doctor Stephen Karpman in 1968 and published in his paper Fairy Tales and Script Drama Analysis. Karpman noted that fairy tales both express and inculcate the norms of society. Through analysing fairy tales across time and place, he concluded that only 3 roles are necessary to establish drama and are indeed expected to be established by an audience. These roles are the persecutor, the victim, and the rescuer. These roles interact with each other, forming a drama triangle, and work well in illustrating some manifestations of special love and special hate. The following is a brief summary of the stereotypical characteristics of each role. The references to special relationships are my own additions, and I've exercised considerable creative license in relating the triangle to course principles. So here we go, the persecutor. This person appears as the dominating force in the triangle, typically a bully who puts others down and intimidates them. The persecutor is aggressive, resentful, and won't accept responsibility when things go sour. They are a law unto themselves and have an I'm in charge orientation. They have special hate relationships with the victim and the rescuer and form special love relationships with anyone outside of the triangle who aids them in their desire to feel powerful and significant. Example in fairy tales include wicked kings and queens. So you'll often find, with the persecutor, that they feel that people outside understand them better. People outside tend to give them the praise and the glory and the appreciation, or at least overt manifestations of all those things that the people at home don't, or something like that. So that's why they have those special love relationships outside of the triangle. The victim. This person bears the brunt of the persecutor's behaviour. They are somehow damaged by the persecutor or have their dreams and aspirations thwarted. Feeling helpless, powerless, and incapable, they have difficulty seeing a way out, making decisions, and seek help from others to solve problems. They have a strong if-only orientation, particularly in relation to the persecutor. If only they would do this, that, or the other. The mark of a special hate relationship. I would say that the persecutor also has a strong if-only orientation, and so would the rescuer, because they all believe that if only somebody else would behave differently, they would feel better. Anyway, the rescuer is their object of special love, and they themselves are the blameless Snow White of fairy tales, or the damsel in distress. That's in Karpman's theory. Okay, now we come to the rescuer. The fixer, who gains self-esteem by helping others. They are a prime candidate for the course's advice, trust not your good intentions. They try to be considerate and selfless and feel a need to fix problems. They have a I'll fix it orientation and feel a sense of responsibility towards the victim with whom they have a special love relationship. thus reserving their hate for the persecutor. They are the knight in shining armour, the hero in fairy tales. All of these roles can shift depending on whether our special needs are met. The rescuer needs the victim to feel helped by their efforts. The victim needs the rescuer to affirm his or her perceptions of the problem so that they can maintain their identity as a helpless victim. And the persecutor needs their outer circle to give them the approval their inner circle doesn't. I would say that the persecutor also needs the victim to cower and back down when the persecutor, wants to feel a sense of control. When any of these needs aren't met, the roles shift for a while, and that creates more drama. If, for example, the rescuer's efforts don't satisfy the victim, the rescuer can feel like a failure. Now the rescuer feels victimised by the victim, and the victim becomes a perpetrator. The rescuer's like, oh, so if only the victim would, take notice of my advice and put all the help I've given them to good use and, sort themselves out, they'd be better, but they don't. And so now you feel, oh, it was all work, all the time and the effort, yada, yada, yada. Now you feel like a victim yourself and the victim as a persecutor. Likewise, if the person generally regarded as the persecutor crumbles in some respect, the victim and the rescuer often become his or her co-rescuers. Because you're so attracted to the role of rescuer, you'll rescue anybody, even if the persecutor now becomes, for whatever reason, is in dire straits. Okay, importantly, it's not the particular actions of anyone that places them in the role of victim, persecutor, or rescuer in Karpman's triangle, but their need to perceive themselves in a particular way. As innocent and powerless, that'd be the victim, as strong and masterly, that'd be the perpetrator, or as good and helpful, that'd be the rescuer. We can help someone on the level of form and not need to identify as a rescuer. In other words, we won't be attached to the outcome of our efforts. We can let, inverted commas, someone yell at us without retaliating and yet not feel hopeless or powerless. We can direct others without feeling a need to control them. And in terms of the Course, we all perceive ourselves to be victims of others whenever we don't experience peace, which would be the victim role. We all make the error real when we get lost in problems of the world and become hell-bent on fixing them. That'd be the rescuer. And we all get a bit bullish when we insist that we know what's right. That would be like a persecutor. Subtitle: The Open Door. The Course's path to inner peace is forgiveness. In the first half of life, we adopt roles such as those described in order to feel safe and cope with the anxiety of a guilty and shameful self-concept. It's just what we do. As we approach midlife and its associated crisis, we begin to realise that our habitual ways of living aren't making us happy and, perhaps more to the point, are becoming intolerable to us. This is a painful realisation, but it opens our mind to the possibility that we could do things differently. To be willing to consider that there might be another way to look at what we think causes us distress is the first step in regaining our sense of agency and control, and a leap towards forgiveness, healing, and letting go of our drama roles. This is how we begin to break the identification with our ego and establish communion with the wholeness and eternal safety of our self, capital S. Quote from the Course: "Belief that there is another way of perceiving is the loftiest idea of which ego thinking is capable. That is because it contains a hint of recognition that the ego is not the self, capital S." End of quote. And when we ask for help to see things differently, now realising there is help available, the Holy Spirit helps us to view another's attack as the result of distress that rests on error and thus calls for help. When we can see another person's behaviour as a call for help that mirrors our own, in recognition that we'd both turned our back on love if indeed we have been upset, healing occurs and the relationship is transformed from specialness to holiness. We're then able to act from a place of peace rather than neediness. But the call for help has already been answered on the level of mind where all minds are joined. While we all share aspects of the victim, persecutor, and rescuer, forgiveness can assist those stuck in a particular role by helping them accept the following. The victim can learn that they don't have to suffer or be self-sacrificing and helpless to atone for their imagined sin of separation and protect themselves from punishment, that it's okay if what they do doesn't please others, that they are more capable than they imagine, and that they have a right to be happy. And here's a quote from Workbook Lesson 101, God's will for me is perfect happiness. The rescuer can learn they're not responsible for the happiness of others. They don't need to help people or fix things in order to feel good about themselves, and people will cope without their help when it's not called for. If they feel a need or compulsion to step in, then chances are they're coming from their own neediness and insecurities. And here's a quote from the Course. The sole responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement for himself. End of quote. Our first duty is to look to our mind and its judgments related to our lack of peace and ask for help to see things from the perspective of the Holy Spirit. To let the problem as we've defined it go into their hands and be as open as we can to a different perspective is how our mind is healed. As we let go of our perception of helpless victims and monstrous victimizers, we'll then be able to approach the situation without our own neediness, and the peace in our minds reminds others of the peace which is also available to them. The persecutor can learn that they don't need to control others to feel in charge. They don't need to diminish others to feel good about themselves, nor win to feel safe. They can learn that their feelings of superiority and grandiosity are, quote, a cover for despair, end of quote, and for a deep-seated belief that they're not good enough. Through forgiveness, they can learn that, quote from the Course, nothing they do or think or wish or make is necessary to establish their worth. Their worth is established by God. End of quote. In conclusion, we leave the desert of the world by recognising that neither our happiness nor unhappiness depends on what goes on outside of us, or on meeting the shoulds and musts that our special roles and associated needs dictate. What I mean by that, the shoulds and the musts, that's like you must make people happy, you should help people, you must be number one, you ought to intervene, those kind of things. We'll encounter internal resistance and perhaps external resistance too around loosening our identification with our roles. They are the devil we know, and developing trust that forgiveness offers us the security and happiness we have sought through them is a process. But at the end of the day, the door is open, and all power lies in our ability to choose forgiveness over grievances, sameness over specialness. Here's a quote from Workbook Lesson 57. My chains are loosened. I can drop them off merely by desiring to do so. The prison door is open. I can leave simply by walking out. Nothing holds me in this world. Only my wish to stay keeps me a prisoner. I would give up my insane wishes and walk into the sunlight at last. End of quote. And that is the end of the essay. So we've learnt that we are resistant to letting go of our roles. They are the devil we know. But the fear of redemption section in A Course in Miracles shows us that there is more than meets the eye to our fear. Firstly, in the Waking to Redemption section, it says this in paragraph 6. Resurrection must compel your allegiance gladly because it is the symbol of joy. Its whole compelling power lies in the fact that it represents what you want to be. The freedom to leave behind everything that hurts you and humbles you and frightens you cannot be thrust upon you, but it can be offered you through the grace of God. Now, what I find interesting here, so resurrection is when we have awakened to fully identifying with the right-minded thought system and the Holy Spirit's love and that memory of wholeness and innocence. If you like, it's like those dogs just finally leaping over that little wall into the right mind and staying there. Now, that section we just read talks about its compelling power lies in the fact that it represents what we want to be. Yet, it can't be thrust upon us. That freedom can't be thrust upon us. We could leave behind everything that frightens us. Yet, if we look at chapter 13 and the fear of redemption, I read this from paragraph 1. In your disordered state of mind, you are not afraid of fear. You do not like it, but it is not your desire to attack that really frightens you. So we're not really afraid of our hate, of our anger, of our desire for vengeance, of the blackness. You know, there's a part in the course where it says you fear that if people were to perceive the truth in you, they would turn away as if repelled by a poisonous snake. Well, that's true on one level, but then there's a deeper level. There's a level under that. We think we're afraid of that about ourselves, of all that we think makes us shameful and guilty. But in the fear of redemption section, it says your bigger fear, your real fear of what underlies all of that blackness. That blackness is just a ploy of the ego to say, don't look at that, it's awful, and we'll just project it out onto everybody else. That's how you'll get rid of it. And Jesus in the Course says, no, let's look at it so we can see its nothingness through the process of forgiveness. We can see its nothingness and then go beyond it. Well, it's the going beyond it that is the real fear of our ego. And the beyond it is the love. And that, in the fear of redemption section, that's what it's saying. That is what we are really afraid of getting in touch with. Because if we get in touch with the love, our ego has told us that that means the end of us. That's it. Zip, we're gone. We're destroyed. We're no longer around. That is the ego's great conspiracy theory. And we have bought it hook, line, and sinker. But the truth is that we don't disappear. We awaken to the real world. We experience joy. We still experience ourselves as here in the world, as the person you think you are, but you're not shameful and guilty. That is the aim of the Course, to get rid of the shame and the guilt. So we need a way of bypassing or dealing with that fear that has been generated by the ego's conspiracy theory. The way we get rid of that fear is explained a little further on in the fear of redemption, and it is on page 242 in my edition, which is the latest from the Foundation of Inner Peace. So it's chapter 13, paragraph 8, sentence 4 onwards I'll be reading from, and then I'll be reading a little bit from paragraph 9. So this is how we deal with that fear of redemption, of getting in contact with that love and that joy. You will find this place of truth as you see it in your brothers. For though they may deceive themselves, like you, they long for the grandeur that is in them. And perceiving it, you will welcome it, and it will be yours. So perceiving it in our brother is then how we are able to welcome it in ourselves. There's also a part in the Course where it says, you see the face of Christ in your brother, then you remember God. So that is how we deal with the fear of God, or the fear of love, is we see the face of Christ in our brother first. We forgive them. We see that they have not done anything to harm us. And of course, that is a process that we do with the Holy Spirit. We absolutely need the Holy Spirit's help to do that because they have the perspective of eternity and the perspective of truth. And opening our minds to their influence is therefore how we see that innocence within somebody else and then in ourselves. Sentence 1 in paragraph 9, save him from his illusions that you may accept the magnitude of your Father in peace and joy. So you can accept the magnitude of your Father, you can accept the love, you can accept the love of your spiritual self in peace and joy, not in fear. As always with the Course, if you want to experience something, it will relate to how you perceive your brother. That's why the Course's path is the way of relationship. And it is only this way that we truly have any power or agency in the world. If we listen to the ego, we will feel helpless because no matter what it tells us, it leaves us with the same miserable lot and we feel like we're going nowhere. And that kind of sense of helplessness is learnt. It's learnt from the ego, and what it tells us is the best way forward, the best way to defend ourselves, the best way to make ourselves happy, and the best way to lessen our insecurities. It just never works. And on that note, I'll end the podcast and thank you very much for listening. Tune in again. Bye.